If you're in search of better filtration and efficiency in a CARB-approved cooler intake, this Flowmaster Delta Force CARB cooler intake with an oiled filter will be a great pick for your 2018 or newer 2.0-liter JL Wrangler. Now this will be for you if you want to ditch the factory filter to keep contaminants out from your off-roading trips or just day-to-day driving with a reliable oiled filter. Not to mention, this will help the motor breathe a lot better, which will help out with better power and efficiency if you're currently lacking in that department. This will feature a sealed heat shield to protect the filter from hot engine bay air, keeping the cool air running into the system to optimize performance. The intake, again, will also feature this large conical oiled filter to grab microscopic contaminants while boasting a large non-resonated intake tube for optimal airflow. Now, in addition to the function, the intake will also just create a sporty look underneath the hood, will not require a tune, and as it says in the name, will have a certified CARB EO number. This will be made of multiple different materials, so starting with the heat shield, this will consist of an alloy construction with a durable black powder coat. Now the filter will consist of 8 layers of cotton gauze filter media that will be cleanable and reusable for the lifetime of the intake. Now the inlet tube will be made of an injection molded cross-linked polyethylene material to resist any heat transfer while remaining durable under the hood. As far as price goes, this will come in at roughly $400, putting this at a more premium price point. Now, what I think really makes this stand out is the fact that this is going to be CARB certified, which a lot of other options don't have, and a high quality construction that's built to last. Now, there will be others on the page with different designs like fully closed air boxes and dry filters. However, if you don't necessarily need the extra protection that an airbox provides or prefer an oiled filter that you won't have to replace, then this is going to be a great choice for you. Now, install will be a pretty simple 1 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter, taking you about an hour to get the job done with some basic hand tools. At this point, we can head over to the shop and check out a detailed breakdown of the install and what that looks like step by step. So that's going to wrap it up for me. Let's go ahead and get into it.
The tools you'll need for this install are a soft pry tool, a trim removal tool, some kind of soapy water or lubricant, an 11mm wrench, 12mm wrench, a 10mm wrench, an adjustable wrench, a 3/8 ratchet or impact, a 4mm Allen socket in 3/8, a 10mm socket in 3/8, and a 12mm socket in 3/8, a short 3/8 extension, a pair of snips, some Teflon tape or thread tape, a 4 Allen key, and a standard screwdriver. Hey everyone, today we're going to be installing an intake on our Wrangler, but first you're going to check out this uninstall video, and then you can meet me right back here and we'll get started with the install.
So our first step is popping the hood, and then we can disconnect some lines from our intake. So on the side of our airbox here, we're going to have 2 lines or 2 hoses. All we have to do is press on this gray tab and pull back. It may be a little bit difficult, especially if you have some mud in your engine bay, so just be mindful of that. So the bottom one has a little green tab that you need to press down. I'm just using a soft pry tool. And press down on that. So this bottom one may be a little bit tricky. You just have to press down on it hard enough. I'm using a soft pry tool in order to do this, but you just press down and pull back just like the top one. You can just move this out of the way and just tuck it on the power steering tank right here. And then what we can do next is disconnect our sensor. So our IAT sensor is right here. All we have to do is press down and pull back. We'll swap this over in just a minute, so we're gonna keep this in the intake tube. And then what we can do at this point is just make sure that this wiring harness is out of the way. So I'm gonna take a clip removal tool and just pop that little Christmas tree clip out of the side of the intake tube. Next, we can remove the 2 10mm bolts that are attaching the intake tube to the upper radiator support. So I'm going to take a 10mm socket and my impact wrench and remove those.
Next, we can pop an 8mm socket onto our impact wrench, or if you're using a ratchet, and then we can loosen up the 2 clamps, one that's connecting to the piping that's going to our turbo, and then one over at the airbox. Just gonna loosen both of those up. Once those are loose, we can put this to the side and we can wiggle that intake tube right off. For this, if you need to use that soft pry tool just to get the tube off the airbox. Wiggle out our intake tube and put that to the side. What we can do next is remove our airbox, and this is going to be held in by a bolt up at the front, and then there's going to be a couple grommets. So I'm going to use a 10mm socket to remove this bolt, and then we can pull the airbox right out. All we have to do at this point is just give our airbox a good lift. And pop that out of place. So now that our intake tube and our airbox is out, we also need to remove our turbo resonator right here. Now this is gonna have a wiring harness with a bracket up top. I'm gonna remove the wiring harness from the side of the resonator. This little clip is attached to this bracket that we're gonna remove fully. So I'm just gonna take a pair of trim removal tool or a clip removal tool, and we can just wiggle that out. Then we can take a 10mm socket and remove the 2 bolts up top. The bracket should pop right off. So now in order to get this turbo resonator off of here, we do have to remove this barbed clamp. Now this is a no tamper clamp, so we're not going to be able to use a socket to remove it. We do have to cut it, and you just cut it with the at the ear here with a pair of heavy duty snips. So I'm just going to take my snips. We're going to go ahead and cut that off. Now once that's off of there, what we can do is just give this a good wiggle, and the resonator should pop right out of there.
So now that we've got this intake off the car, before we can just set this whole thing to the side, we're going to need to remove this sensor. The sensor gets reused on the new intake. So all we need to do is just rotate it. To get this thing out, all we need to do is just rotate it clockwise. This. Till about there, and it should pull right out like that. And we're just going to set this thing to the side, and we're done with the factory intake. And now the next step, we're going to start assembling our new intake, and we're going to begin that process with the airbox. So we're using these little angle brackets that come in the kit. We're going to be attaching them to the bottom of the airbox so that the grommets can slip in and hold the airbox in place. So to do that, we're going to line up these 2 holes on the bottom of the bracket to the holes that are on the bottom of the airbox, and we're facing the angled down aspect right here. See that arm that comes out there is going to be facing towards the cutout side of the bottom of the airbox. I'm going to set that there, and then in my kit I have 2 different types of bolts. I have coarse thread and fine thread bolts. These that we're going to use for this are the coarse thread bolts. That means the threads are larger and wider apart than the other ones. Then I'm going to use one of the lock washers that were included. Put that on the bolt, and one of the larger washers. Put that right on the bolt like that. I'm going to dangle it through the hole. Then I'm going to grab one of the nuts that are included in the kit and attach it through the bottom. And I'm just going to do the same thing for the other hole here. Just like this. Drop it through. Taking my nut. Then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for the other bracket. And then to tighten these guys down, I'm not using an impact. An impact would strip these. They're a little too violent for this. But what I am going to use is a 4mm Allen socket and an extension just to tighten them down by hand a little bit and get my ratchet out of the way of all this going on. And my 3/8 ratchet. And then to hold the nut still on the bottom, I'm using an 11 wrench. I'm going to start with this one here. Like that. Start to tighten it down. Make it snug. Compress that lock washer. Just tight enough to hold it, not tight enough to strip. Do the same thing here. And then for the other bracket as well. Next, now that we have these brackets installed, we're going to install the feet onto them that press into the grommets to hold the intake. So to do that, we're going to be using a fine thread bolt on each, one of these smaller lock washers that fits the fine thread bolt, and a regular washer just like that. I'm just going to pass it up through the bottom. Start it with our fingers into the foot like that. And then same thing on the other side. Then once you have those guys snugged up, I'm using a 4 Allen key because my socket doesn't fit underneath here. And I'm going to start tightening them down and just holding that foot so it doesn't spin when I spin the bolt. So you can see I get to a point where I can't hold this with my hand. So what I'm going to end up doing is using a 12mm wrench just to hold that still, and I can spin it back just like that. That'll stay nice and tight because of that lock washer. We're going to start tightening with the Allen key on the other side. Do the same thing. Now that those angle brackets are installed, we're ready to start installing our filter onto the airbox. So I'm using this filter adapter piece here, and I'm putting it through the inside of the airbox and lining up those threads and bolt holes there through the holes in the airbox. What I'm going to do to secure that is take one of the fine thread bolts, a lock washer, and one of those regular washers. Hold this up here, put them in through the airbox. Do that to all 3 of them with the same washer setup on each. Then I'm using my 4mm Allen socket on a 3/8 extension just to start tightening them down. You really should be able to get these close to where they need to be by hand. Really do not need to be very tight. Inserts in the filter adapter are brass, and they will strip pretty easily because brass is really soft. Just like that. I'm going to take my 3/8 ratchet, just snug them up a little bit. Now that we've got this piece installed into the airbox, we're good to spin it around. You can see it has a nice fitment in there, and that our filter slides right over it. Before we put that on, we need to put our hose clamp on the filter. And when I'm putting the hose clamp on, I'm making sure that the direction the bolt on the hose clamp is facing is at a spot where it's accessible from up top in the engine bay, so that when you need to clean your filter, you can get to this hose clamp and quick pop it off. So in that case, this is the bottom, so I need it facing up. So I'm gonna have the bolt facing down towards the table when I'm assembling it, just like that. Then I can go ahead and tighten that down with a standard screwdriver. Now that we're finished assembling our airbox and we have our filter installed, we can start work on our intake tube and then attach the two together. So the first step in doing that is we're going to install our fitting here. It's on the other one, but that one can't be transferred over to this. So included with the kit is a T-fitting and a barb. These can screw into each other like that, and we can mount them in there for those factory hose fittings that are coming off the engine with those push clips. Before we do that, we're going to need to install some thread tape onto these fittings so that we get a nice seal with no leaks. Less is more with this. The more you put on, the more packed your threads are, and you can put too much on for sure. So I'm just wrapping it once, and I'm kind of pushing it into the threads with my fingers like that. Then I'm going to go ahead and thread the T-fitting into the intake. Careful not to cross thread. Just like that. May need to shift the direction of this a little bit depending on where it goes on the vehicle. Then I'm going to do the same thing with some Teflon tape on that barb. Just a little bit, enough to wrap it around. Make sure not to get it in the hole, then you're not going to have a nice seal. Then go ahead, screw this guy in. I might have to rotate it to the other side actually to get this to clear full rotation. Perfect, just like that. Looks just about right. Excess Teflon tape out of there. And then the last thing we need to do to this fitting is install the third piece that comes with the kit. Now this guy does need one of the supplied O-rings pushed on to the threads there. See how I have it sitting all the way against the neck. And it also needs a little bit of Teflon tape, just a little bit. You gotta be really careful with this one, because if it gets on the O-ring, we're not gonna get seated nicely. So we need to make sure that we're not touching the seat area. And we can start threading this piece into that fitting like that. This guy's gonna go in all the way, just because we need to compress that O-ring at the end. Once I'm ready to tighten these guys down, I'm using an adjustable wrench. Just gonna crank away on that until that O-ring compresses. You'll feel it seat at the bottom like that. Then I'm gonna do the same thing for this one. Remember, I have to have this facing towards me to get a full rotation out of it. Probably can do it by hand a little bit farther, but yeah, it's about snugged up actually. We're gonna leave it right there. Nice and tight. And then I'm not gonna thread this into the intake all the way quite yet, just because I don't know what orientation this is gonna need to be, and it might need to be adjusted a little bit, just so that we can get these facing the right direction. And the next thing we're gonna do is flip the intake over and look for this hole. This guy right here, drilled out hole into the intake. Once you find that hole, there's a grommet that looks like this. It's included with the kit. We're gonna press this into that hole. This might take a little bit of work. You might need to lubricate it a little bit to get it to slide in nicely. Make sure it's seated properly in the groove in the side so that something can pass through it. Just kind of pushing around that inner lip to make sure the bottom seats properly on the inside as well. You might even be able to reach your finger up in the intake tube like I can and just feel it from the inside. Make sure that grommet is seated properly. There we go. That's in and fitting pretty nice. So we're ready to push our sensor in through. The first thing I'm going to do is pull off this O-ring that's on the sensor there. Then this is going to be pretty tough to push through here. We're not using the same spin lock way that this would mount into the factory intake. This just seats in there and pushes right on through. So to get that going in a little bit easier, what I'm going to do is just take a little bit of soapy water and just be real gentle spraying around the neck area of this. I don't want to get any water on the part that actually reads anything. Set that off to the side. Should help me get it through. You just wiggle it back and forth. Don't just push straight because it might push the grommet through the other side. A little bit of wiggling. Get that thing seated in there. If you push the grommet through, you can just reach your hand in through the intake. Push it right back like that. Work my way in. Look at that, it's seated. It works for me, that looks good. All right, now we've got our sensor installed. So what we're gonna do next is mount the intake tube to the air box. Now to get these two secured together, I'm gonna use this piece that comes in the kit. It's a little union, silicone union, and 2 hose clamps. So if this is going to sit like this in the engine bay, I want to have these hose clamps facing up so I can maneuver them, get everything tightened down once we know the orientation of everything. So I'm going to use the hose clamps in this direction so that the bolt is facing up at me. Going to put them on our union first, just like that. I'm going to slip that on there and do the same thing for this side. That's about what it's going to be. What I can actually do, snug up the one on the airbox side right away, because we only need to rotate one of them to get the angle perfect. Just using my standard screwdriver. Closing them up. And making sure our airbox is pushed in all the way as well, just so we're not having it seated correctly, just like that. Looks good. Get that one locked down. This one's really loose yet. I'm gonna get it about where it needs to be, and I'm gonna just snug this one up. I'm not gonna crank down on it because we still need to do some adjustment once it's on the car. There we go. Now we got movement in there. Now what we're gonna go ahead and do is throw this on the car and check our fitment out. So we've got our intake ready to drop into the engine bay. One thing I'm gonna do before we even test fit this is I'm gonna take that last hose clamp that's in the kit and I'm gonna slip it over the boot that's attached to the turbo. So I'm just gonna lift the sensor bracket up and I'm slipping it over so that the bolt on the hose clamp is facing upward so we can get to it easy with a screwdriver. Next, we're going to drop our intake into place and check the fitment of the tube. So if you look down in there, there's 2 grommet holes. We're going to line up with these pins. You would have seen them when you pulled the filter out as well. They're still used with the new intake. Just going to line them up. You can see I'm glad we didn't tighten that down right away because that was not spun correctly. Now I didn't push the whole intake tube down into those grommets because we're not quite ready to secure it to the vehicle yet. One thing we're going to do now though is make sure that these are in the correct orientation. And you can see that this guy is kind of riding a little high and we can't quite reach the hose to it. So we're going to need to spin this whole assembly to the point where we can get it to where it is doable, where we can put those hoses on. Looks like it's going to be right about there. Yep, I can definitely slip that guy on and that one. So that works. That's a good spot. I'm not going to throw them on yet. Next, I'm going to align the intake tube so that the other end can go into that boot on the turbo. That looks good right about there. Those are sitting in the grommet, and that is all the way in the union here. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten down my hose clamp on the union when I'm happy with how everything is sitting. So just some finishing touches now. We're going to install some of this edge gasket that they supplied with the kit around the outside of the airbox. We're going to start with the feet that go into the grommets facing up. Our first piece we're going to do is start at the bottom here like this. Just going to slide it on like that, push it into every little crevice. Perfect. Bring it up around the corner. And when I get to the spot where it needs to be cut, I'm going to take a pair of snips and I'm going to cut it. Trim it up at the point where it needs to be done. Go, like that. And bend it over and secure it all into. Okay, now there's one part done. This other part we're going to do in one run all the way down to the other piece. I'm going to put it on and slide it down so it overlaps over the piece that I cut. Like that. Work it in all the way. Now, making this turn might be tricky. Kind of have to get it lined up on the next piece. Work it into the corner. And just working it into that crevice there. Again with that one. Then when you get to the point where you need to stop, we're going to take those same pair of wiring cutters and we're going to start snipping. Use those snips to cut right through metal at the bottom, just like that. Now we've got that all done. Now that we've got all that edge gasket installed, we're good to drop this right in and secure it for the final time. So we've got it sitting in its home. Just gonna put a little bit of force down on this and pop those feet into the grommets, just like that. There they went. Then we're good to slip these 2 hoses back onto the fittings we installed. All I need to do is just push, just like that. Push down that little tab and slide it over if it won't go by itself. Sometimes it can be a little bit stubborn. Makes it a little bit easier to pop them over and push that tab down. Like that. Here we go. There's those in. Then we're gonna move over to our turbo and tighten that hose clamp down. So now over in front of our turbo, we can slide that boot over the intake tube since we got it all lined up nicely. Should fit perfect. Take our standard screwdriver, tighten down that hose clamp there, so that the boot is secured to the intake. Next thing I'm going to do is take that sensor that we put in through the grommet and plug it back in, just like that. And then we just need to secure this bracket for the sensor back onto the intake tube. And to do that, we can go ahead and reuse the factory hardware that we took out. Those are two 10mm bolts. I'm gonna get them started by hand. Second one is a little tough to get to because of the wire that's in front of it. Just gonna get it in the right direction there, right angle, so it doesn't strip. And I'm taking a 10mm deep socket and a 3/8 extension. I'm gonna tighten them all the way by hand. And then again, the threads in there are brass, so I'm not gonna tighten them down super tight. Just gonna snug them up with my 3/8 ratchet. Now that that's done, we just have one more step. We're gonna cap off the airbox, and then we're all finished up. So, got my airbox cap here, setting it down to line up those bolt holes. Then the bolts I'm gonna be using are the last couple coarse thread Allen bolts. On those, I'm using a lock washer. Put that on first. And a regular washer, just like every other bolt on the whole intake. And do the same for the other two. And then to snug them up, I'm using my 4mm Allen on a socket and an extension, my ratchet. I'm gonna compress those lock washers, snug those bolts up. And that's install complete. That was the Flowmaster Delta Force Carb Cold Air Intake with oiled filter for the 2018 and newer 2-liter Jeep Wrangler JL. For all things Jeep, remember to keep it right here at extremeterrain.com.